Night in the Black Sea is a black canvas smudged only by the faint orange of distant platforms and the low, indifferent hiss of waves. In this same Black Sea, at 2 a.m. in September 2025, inside a $500 million Russian oil rig, an operator thumbed at a console with the comfort of routine. He had been trained to believe the sea was a shield as much as a highway, that deep water platforms were safe behind layers of radar, missiles, and doctrine. But little did he know that 2 Ukrainian drones were racing just 10 feet above the waves, their noses angled towards the war machine. So today, let's explore Ukraine's attack on Russia's $500 million oil rigs. A strike at a financial circulatory system. A move to blind an army and to send the Kremlin a message that nowhere was beyond reach. The mission began in the small surgical hours when every move demanded perfect precision. At 10:15 p.m. from a secret base near Odessa, a small constellation of vehicles and devices left the shadows. 2 naval drones were deployed into the Black Sea, skimming low at 50 feet. They did not take a straight path. Instead, they traced a cunning arc around Snake Island, hugging the curvature of the Earth itself to keep from presenting a clean radar profile. Under the surface, an unmanned underwater vehicle also slipped into the water. It played a quieter role, one of deception, a decoy emitter broadcasting fake sonar pings meant to pull Russian attention into the wrong place. But modern conflict is not a question of single instruments. It is a system of systems. For this reason, days earlier, a routine cargo ship had left Romania. Inside one of its containers hid a Ukrainian robotic relay boat. 30 miles from the target, a crane lowered that ghostly vessel into the sea. The ship sailed on, disappearing into normal commerce while the ghost boat became the mission's floating nerve center, relaying commands, compensating for distance, and holding responsibility for everything that followed. To have such a relay was to accept a single, unbearable risk. If that lone boat were discovered, the drones would become million-dollar wrecks, blind and deaf in enemy waters. So everything hinged on its invisibility. For hours, the slow, patient sweep of Ukrainian devices painted the night with invisible strokes. The plan was exquisite in its simplicity and brutal in its logic. Then, 12 miles away, something that was not scheduled happened. A Russian corvette sonar operator felt the prick of intuition. He heard a sound too neat, too perfectly looped to be a real submarine's natural hum. Instantly, he raised the alarm. A Tor M2 missile screamed toward the phantom signal in the water. At nearly the same time, the rig's radar blinked weakly as the lead Ukrainian drone pushed into detection range. Russian commanders, primed for menace and hungry for kills, believed the trap had closed. But this was not the moment of failure. It was the instant of revelation, the moment many campaigns live and die on, when mistake and feint and courage collide. Instead of surrendering to the missile, the lead drone performed a move that looked like either audacity or madness. As FPV drones, small and fast, rose and drifted into the sky, TORM-2's onboard logic saw a bright visible target and dove for it. The tiny FPV was obliterated in a fireball that lit the waves long enough to make the night gasp. But its death was a sacrifice in a larger calculus. The missile consumed the decoy, not the fleet, and the main game moved on. When the rig's radar locked on the drones, the Russians prepared a missile salvo to destroy them. That was the exact moment the Ukrainians chose to pull the curtain of electric chaos. The lead drone detonated an electronic warfare attack that flooded the radar screen with digital static. For 30 crucial seconds, the rig was blind. It was in that engineered blindness that the mission's precision unfolded. Hatches on the lead drone snapped open and 4 more FPV drones spilled into the night. These were not crude toys. They were small, hardened, and guided by a secure signal relayed from the ghost boat. Designed to resist jamming and to disappear into the sea's reflective clutter, They wove a deadly choreography, aiming first for the rig's antennas and jammers. The eyes and voice of Russian control over territories such as Kherson. The underwater drone, cloaked by 3-foot swells, rose and fired a 10-pound torpedo that cracked a concrete leg's integrity. The rig staggered, shaken, one of its pillars bleeding structural confidence. Now the electronic strike was a flare across the sea, and flares are visible. Thus, 80 miles away, two Su-30s read the unnatural signal and, using their radars, filtered the sea clutter to reveal 4 distinct heat signatures. On the other hand, beneath the waves, panic gripped the Russian corvette. The acoustic decoy that had led them to fire a TOR missile had been a trick. This made them race toward the torpedo's origin, deploying anti-torpedo defenses, activating close-range sonar, and boxing the underwater drone into a shrinking ocean cage. At 1:47 a.m., the battlefield's choreography reached its brightest, most dangerous beat. The Su-30 pilot had a perfect lock, and the corvette's sonar had the UUV's coordinates. Any other force might have been broken here. But the breathtaking irony of this night was that this chaos was not unplanned. The Ukrainians had built a deception whose final act was to draw the predators into an elaborate theater and feed them the prey they craved. The Su-30 pilot was not actually locking onto the fragile FPV drones. His missile sought the heat signature of the drone mothership, the larger craft whose engine and thermal footprint made it irresistible to heat-seeking weapons. The mothership had been designed to look like a target. It had been the intentional honey trap. At the moment the pilot squeezed the trigger, the mothership committed its last trick. It ejected hyper-intense thermal decoys, burning brighter than its engine. The incoming missile found the wrong signal and veered violently. The missile detonated harmlessly above open water while the mothership, its mission complete, faded into the night. Simultaneously, the underwater drone used the fight above to create its own opening. Trapped and without room to outrun the corvette, it fired a second torpedo. Not outward at the ship, but inward at the same concrete leg it had struck before. The explosion sent a cloud of concrete dust and churning bubbles that overwhelmed the corvette's sonar. Every layer of Russia's defense around that $500 million platform, the radar, the missiles, the sonar, the corvette, the interceptor jets had been systematically teased apart, outmaneuvered, and neutralized. Nothing held any longer. The rig lay exposed. At 1:48 a.m., a single command cut the sea like a blade: execute. Eventually, the remaining FPV drones were no longer discreet scouts. They were predators. Racing at the speed of 150 miles per hour, 2 drones struck the rig's communications arrays, silencing its voice to the outside world. The other 2 dove into GPS jammers and protective systems and destroyed them. Down below, the underwater drone launched its final torpedo. It found the same compromised leg and detonated, sending a devastating shockwave through the rig's weakened core. Eventually, the pipes snapped, power lines arced, foundation connections fractured. The structural integrity that had been the rig's promise to its investors and its protectors failed like brittle glass under a hammer. Then, in the space of a handful of breaths, the chain reaction unfolded. 4,000 gallons of crude oil rushed from ruptured pipes. Sparks from compromised electrical lines found the oil's vapor and transformed the spill into a furnace. Temperature surged into the thousands of degrees. Steel softened, concrete blistered, and the platform became an erupting cathedral of flame. The $500 million complex that had loomed like a titan, oversupply lanes, and strategic plans was reduced to a collapsing silhouette, a pyre of commerce and military leverage. The immediate tactical consequences were stark and brutal. The rig's destruction removed a node that had been a logistical and communication hub for Russian southern operations. In practical terms, it constricted fuel flows, complicated supply lines, and increased the cost and risk of the Kremlin's regional operations. Fuel is a multiplier. Fewer barrels mean fewer convoys, fewer armored movements, and stretched lines for an already pressured logistics chain. Thus, the ripple effect was felt in convoys delayed, in the tempo of operations slowed, and in the economic calculus of a conflict sustained in part by oil revenues. But these are not the only consequences. The psychological blow was double-edged. For Ukrainian forces and civilian populations, the strike signaled a protective reach. Critical infrastructure that once seemed safe is now a battlefield. For the Russian side, the message carried different textures. The illusion of invulnerability had been punctured. A platform once treated as a fortress had been methodically unmade by deception, electronics, and asymmetric ingenuity. That's why the Kremlin had to reassess not only the material loss, but also the vulnerability of its supply architecture and its aura of strategic predictability. Politically and economically, the explosion reverberated beyond the waves. Oil markets skim the surface of such events with rapid suspicion as a major platform's loss contributes to price volatility, to insurance hikes for maritime traffic, and to recalibration among energy investors. And for the region's civilian populations, there is the more immediate human cost, such as potential disruptions to employment, environmental damage, and the specter of contaminated seas. In the days after the attack, the Black Sea smelled of oil and scorched metal. Salvage crews, insurance investigators, and military intelligence teams reached the scene for lessons. The ghost boat's existence and the specific weapon sets might be matters of conjecture, but the lesson was stark and public. A platform is not a safe haven simply because it sits offshore. For Ukraine, the attack was a theater-sized demonstration of how electronic warfare, deception, and small, high-speed strike elements can combine to produce huge results. For the Kremlin, it was an urgent call to adapt or accept the gradual erosion of its logistical lifelines. Ultimately, the blast was more than a military victory. It was a narrative device in a larger story of conflict, a puncture in the image of untouchability, a cautionary tale about hubris and complacency. Now, what are your thoughts about this destruction of Russia's $500 million oil rigs? Share with us in the comments section below. We would love to read them. Also, if you like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting content.